the title of my little talk is Mindfulness and Metta, the keys to the kingdom of happiness. Yes, it is okay to be happy. I think possibly we do live in a culture that sometimes, well, you get the impression that it's not okay to be happy. Um, and it is okay to be happy, even when things are not going well. It is okay to be happy, and it's possible to be happy. That I think is quite a fundamental, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of principle in the Buddha's teachings, and it's important not to lose sight of that. Buddhism is an optimistic worldview, which says that it's okay to be happy. I think we're in a very particular moment, aren't we? I think, as a nation, as a society, emerging from this lockdown experience into what? Something quite uncertain. Sometimes it feels confused. And now, more than ever, actually, a meditation practice is very, very helpful. It's really helpful to maintain sort of a continuity of practice, even as the world around you changes. And it's quite a challenge to maintain a continuity of practice in a way. I'm going away for the weekend for the first time in, I don't know, 3 or 4 months. And it's quite, I notice already that that's kind of a challenge for my meditation practice, because it won't be so easy to sort of be there in the shrine room at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning as I usually am. But still, I can make arrangements to maintain that continuity. Yes, that is going to sustain me as I sort of go out there into the world. And what I want to explore, actually, within the context of this principle of happiness, is how meditation can help us to come to terms with and overcome the difficulties that we encounter in life. So meditation can provide you with everything you need, actually. It can provide you with everything you need to creatively overcome your problems, and grow and develop in the process. You might need other things to help as well, but sometimes meditation will point you in that direction. The awareness and the stillness and the continuity you achieve in meditation is going to orient you towards making creative choices and positive choices. And being happy also supports making the right kinds of choices to deal with your difficulties. So, over the last couple of weeks, I've highlighted how meditation can bring us the experience of freedom. And I've defined freedom as the capability to act from our deepest values. But meditation also provides us with a freedom that comes from emerging from suffering or emerging from difficulties. There's a feeling of freedom that we experience once we leave that difficulty behind. And what is happiness? What is happiness? Memorably, I got quite addicted to Mad Men actually a bit earlier on this year, never having seen it before. And the little beginning sort of part of Mad Men on Netflix is Don Draper defining happiness. as a brand new car. And of course, that's not what happiness is. That is not what happiness is. I think in Buddhism, happiness emerges as we simplify our wants, in fact, as we realize very deeply that a new car is not going to make us feel better. So, how does that happen in meditation? How do we get to grips with the difficulties that we're experiencing? How do we overcome those difficulties, and how do we become happy? So I'm going to try and explain that. And in order to explain that, I think, to identify the two sort of traditional principal aims of meditation, or outcomes of meditation. And there are some ancient Indian words for those. They are shamatha and vipassana. So shamatha is concentration, absorption, that flow that we enter into when we get into our stride in the meditation. That is shamatha. And vipassana is insight, awareness of the way things really are. And an awareness of the way things are that changes us, either in a subtle way or sometimes in quite a transformational way. And we can also say classically that the mindfulness of breathing is a shamatha practice. We get into an absorbed, concentrated, flowing state by focusing on the breath. And we could say that Metta Bhavana is an insight practice, in that by reflecting on our relationships, we become aware of where we're stuck, and we can sort of let go and become more equanimous. So that's a kind of insight that brings about change. But we can also sometimes have an insight experience whilst we're practicing the mindfulness of breathing, noticing the ever-changing quality of the breath, and realizing that is the way things are. Nothing stays the same. And therefore, we can just let go of the things that we're clinging on to. And Metta Bhavana can also be a shamatha practice, in that by accumulating our awareness of positivity, friendliness, we can become more concentrated and more absorbed. So these two practices really help us to accomplish a sort of a steadiness and a flow in our lives, and that prepares you to tackle life's difficulties. So then what? You know, maybe that's already true for you. Maybe you have quite a steady meditation practice. Maybe you find it easy to get into flow. Maybe you don't always find it easy, but you know that you can do it, and you stick at it. But surely, what then? What next? In fact, I remember, Tom, you asking me this question about a year or so ago. What do you do when you get to this sweet spot in your meditation? And again, traditionally, what we do at that point is we bring a teaching to mind. We bring a teaching to mind. That's what the Buddha would advise you to do when you've reached this sweet spot in your meditation. So I thought I would introduce or remind us of a particular teaching of the Buddha's. The Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths. So if we were all here in the room, I'd sort of do that teacherly thing and ask you to put your hand up if you know of the Four Noble Truths. But I can't do that. I'm going to assume that you have some acquaintance with the Four Noble Truths. If you don't, they will become clearer by the end of this talk. And I'm going to read you a quote from Bhante Sangharakshita about the Four Noble Truths to sort of illustrate how they can help us in meditation. So Sangharakshita says that the Buddha's problem-solving approach finds expression in his teaching of the Four Noble Truths. So these Four Noble Truths are a kind of blueprint for Buddhist practice. And the first of these truths states quite simply that unhappiness exists as a feature of human life. Unhappiness is going to be there in your experience. So this is to state the obvious, no doubt. But the second noble truth, the cause of this suffering, the cause of this unhappiness, gives more food for thought. The essential cause of suffering, of all suffering, all unhappiness, all anxiety, all difficulty, all unsatisfactoriness, the essential cause of that, says the Buddha, is craving. The desire, which is quite natural, but actually quite painful, for things to be other than they are. If we can let go of this desire, if we can accept the rise and fall of experience as it is, not just in our heads, but in our heart of hearts, the problem of suffering will be solved. Simple. Sounds so simple, doesn't it? But how can we do this? Well, I think we should just try it. I think we should do a period of the Metta Bhavana. And as we practice the Metta Bhavana, engage with the practice, noticing mindfully those moments when you might be, or you certainly are, clinging to something. Clinging, calling it mine is a way of clinging. Thinking of it as your property is a way of clinging. Or noticing when in some way you're pushing something away, rejecting, not wanting it to be here. Just noticing these things. Noticing when you drift off into a fantasy that takes you quite a long way from the practice and from the object of your practice. So quite simply, in this practice, we're quite simply noticing those things, identifying the clinging, the pushing away, and the slipping off into fantasy. And we don't really seek to stop clinging or stop pushing away or even stop fantasizing. But we do see if we can disidentify from those kind of volitions, those willed thought processes, those willed emotions, if that makes sense. We sort of say, aha, that's me clinging. And by that, we are sort of just detaching from it. So now this isn't the easiest thing to do, but it is possible. And even the very smallest a bit of progress in this area can have significant sort of karmic beneficial effects. So even if you just notice the desire to scratch your nose when it itches, if you notice that in time and you don't carry out that action, you just explore the nature of the itch until it disappears. That is a very good moment of training that prepares you for letting go of the grosser um, uh, instances of clinging or pushing away, the romantic attachment or the sexual attachment or whatever. And the key is to keep it in the moment, not to get distracted by the big picture of your life. In meditation, we stay in the big moment, we stay connected to the direct experience we're having now, and we work on the ground to disentangle ourselves from the clingings and pushings away and the fantasies that are happening right here and now. That will have a beneficial effect on the big picture, but you don't want to get distracted by the big picture just now. Trust the practice. So I suggest it's time that we set ourselves up for a period of the Metta Bhavana. So find your seat. So in a way, it's just going to be a fairly short period of meditation. Maybe you can think of it as a way of just exploring what you've heard this evening and seeing if you can begin to put it in practice. So as you take your seat, taking the time to arrive and to really land. Noticing the contact of your body with the floor. Coming into connection with the breath. And the quality of your breath will give you actually quite a bit of information about how you actually are just now. And you don't need to change it. If the breath is short and a bit catchy, that's okay. Just be with it as it is. And perhaps as we connect with the breath and we notice how we are, we can just move into the first stage of the Metta Bhavana. Keeping it really simple. Just cultivating an awareness of yourself here and now. Sitting in meditation, breathing, how does it feel to be me just now? Perhaps noticing the physical aspects of your experience, pleasant and unpleasant. Perhaps becoming aware of the emotional tone of your experience. Are you able to be with it? Do you want to push it away? Are you searching for something different from what you have just now? Perhaps allowing the breath to be your friend, bring you into a kindly, curious relationship with how you are just now. You don't need to change it or fix it. But it would be beneficial to bring awareness to your experience. Just notice any clinging, attachment. Seeing if you can relax. Perhaps noticing any aversion to your experience, physical, emotional, psychological. Be quite simply noticing and softening, coming back to the breath and the moment. We can accept the rise and fall of experience as it is. We can come to terms with the problem of suffering, unsatisfactoriness. Now, just on the basis of the first stage, just opening your awareness, your heart, to include a good friend. Just taking the time to bring this friend to mind. allowing the warmth and the positivity to support your concentration and your absorption. Just seeing how your liking for your friend inhabits your heart. There may be traces of, or there almost certainly will be, attachment, maybe some picking and choosing what you like and dislike about your friend. Seeing if you can do them the respect, taking them in fully without reference to yourself. So it's quite easy to get into quite a heady situation with this practice. If you notice that, that's okay. But remembering to come back to an awareness of the body and the breath and the moment, yourself in meditation, bringing to mind this good friend. As it were, setting them free and wishing them to be happy. So we're expanding our concern from ourself to our good friend. Just noticing if the self, myself, tries to stay in the center of the picture. It's perfectly natural. The most important thing is just to notice. Then, in the third stage, when you're ready, expanding your awareness even further. Taking into your awareness the neutral person, familiar stranger. So you may find that you resist moving on from the pleasure of being with your friend to this unknown being. Just being aware of that. Seeing if you can cultivate a friendly curiosity about this neutral person. You will have taken in quite a bit of information. You'll have somewhere in your unconscious awareness quite a few thoughts and feelings about this person. Seeing if you can bring those into your awareness. And acknowledging, imagining, realizing that this person is far richer and stranger and more complicated than you can imagine. They have the capacity to be very happy and very sad. And they will have had moments of joy and tragedy in their lives. And if you've become distracted, your mind has wandered off, just noticing that. It's a moment of mindfulness to have noticed. And with metta, you just turn back. Remind yourself of your intention to bring this neutral person to mind. Wish them well. And in the fourth stage, just expanding your awareness and your heart to take in the difficult person, the person who for you is difficult. But here we are, in a way, at the heart of the practice, really engaging with the first noble truth, truth of suffering. It's important to own the suffering, to take responsibility for your difficulty. It can be quite helpful just to breathe it into your heart. Trust the practice. Can you turn towards this person and see them from another perspective than your own difficulty? And your difficulty may arise on the basis of an unmet need or the transgression of something that you value very highly. Just exploring and acknowledging that for yourself. It doesn't belong to the difficult person, it belongs to you. You have the key to unlock it, to resolve it. It may not be obvious just now, but to own it and at the same time to actively wish the person well is a step on the path to resolution. And at this stage, it may be very helpful as we move into the fifth stage just to refresh the practice, bringing to mind yourself, your good friend, a neutral person, and the difficult person. The practice is built layer on layer. So each layer needs to be solid to support the next. Making some intelligent decisions about how to continue the practice. And if you're ready, just expanding again to take in the other people meditating with you this evening. People in your house, building, street. village, quite methodically and at your own pace, expanding your well-wishing to include all beings, human and non-human. If that becomes too much, too overwhelming, it's never too late just to begin from the beginning and build it carefully back. And then just for the last minute or so of the practice, just letting go of all effort. Just coming back to simply sitting. And as I ring the bell, in your own time, opening your eyes and coming out of the meditation posture. So we try to squeeze in a world to a short on YouTube. But it's really great to have you here. It's an odd thing, but it is very enjoyable to practice. I prefer it. It's really good to be here as well. And we've got a few minutes left. If you have any reflections you'd like to make or questions you'd like to ask, I'd be very happy to try to respond helpfully. Just looking at Liz now because she's got the chat box up.
Yeah, I think we're in yet.
I mean, you don't have to either.
I was just thinking, because you said about there being 4 noble truths.
Yes.
Did you mention them all?
I didn't, did I?
No.
The 4 noble truths. Well, the first noble truth is the truth of suffering. The second noble truth is, can I remember? The second noble truth is the cause of suffering. So there is suffering. The first noble truth is that suffering is, it's woven into human experience and everybody has it, whether it's just the unsatisfactoriness of aching feet or something a bit more troubling than that. And it has a cause. That's the second noble truth. The cause being self-clinging. And the third noble truth is that it ends. Everything is impermanent. Everything arises and passes away. So that's the third noble truth. And then, the Buddha has the fourth noble truth. The fourth noble truth, the Buddha then kind of pulls a bit of a fast one, because that's the Noble Eightfold Path, which leads to suffering. And that Eightfold Path essentially is the practice of meditation and the study of Buddhism. But what I was emphasizing is this, in a way, it seems very simple, almost trite, these 4 noble truths. But what I'm emphasizing is that actually we can reflect on these truths. I strongly recommend that you kind of memorize them. It's interesting how actually I've memorized them, and yet when I'm put on the hot spot like this, I can't quite remember, because, well, it's very important to reflect on these and not assume that you know what it means. And there's a number of teachings like that you can drop into your meditation practice when you're absorbed, when you're flowing, that will help you to come into a more realistic relationship to your experience. I hope that makes sense. Yes. Anything else?
There's nothing coming through the chat box at the moment. I was also thinking that when we were meditating about the 2 arrows.
The 2 arrows. Yes. Can you say more? Liz was thinking about a thing called the 2 arrows. Could you say more, Liz?
Well, just that, there's dukkha, and that's like, we feel pain in our knee, and that's like the first arrow that we can't necessarily do about. But then there's what we do about the pain in our knee that creates more suffering for ourselves. So we worry about it, or we fret we're going to need a knee operation, or we go on about how painful it is, so we get into bad mental states, or that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yes, interesting. So there's kind of this primary suffering, and which is unavoidable, and which is this kind of this thing that is woven into our experience, and we can't avoid it. Then there's also secondary suffering, which is how we respond to it, which will be, like, oh my God, my foot is going to fall off, or something, which is unnecessary and not needed. And that can be very easily sort of dealt with in meditation once you become aware. So we can reduce the amount of suffering that we've got to work with. Yes, interesting. Yes. Well, maybe that will be enough for this evening. thank you for coming. Next week, we're going to be starting a new series of 6 classes. And the title of that series is Change Your Life, Learn to Meditate. So we will very likely be exploring very similar themes to the one that we've been exploring this evening and in recent weeks. What we're aiming to do in this class is kind of highlight the core elements of meditation and explore how we can become how we can build those into our practice and develop and maintain a sort of continuous, nourishing, effective meditation practice. And another thing that Bhante Sangharakshita says is that non-repetition is the canker of the spiritual life. And I think that is very, very true. So it's really, really good to keep coming back to these core principles and explore them in your own experience and to hear about how other people are working in the meditation. So you're very, very welcome to come again next week and
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you up mid-flow, but Tom was just asking about whether the upcoming course is suitable for total newcomers.
We have on our YouTube channel, we've got sort of a tutorial videos that will teach you the practices from scratch. So you can learn those. You could sit with those videos 2 or 3 times, and then you'd be ready to come to the live streamed class. And of course, these live streamed talks and meditations stay up on the channel, so you can come back to them and explore them at your leisure as well. So that's a sort of yes, Tom. That's a yes. And yeah, this is all part of our ongoing sort of going online project, which Artisidi and Liz and Tom and David and I are engaged in with Meditation Night. And many of you are already donating very generously to us, for which we are extremely grateful. And that's really giving us the support and the vote of confidence that we need to continue. And if you haven't already donated to Cambridge Buddhist Centre, please do think about doing that. I think Liz is typing in the link to our donations page. And we'd be really, really grateful to receive the help that you have to give. And it'd be lovely to see you here again next week, and tell your friends about this class. So I think that's it. Lovely to see you. Well, I didn't see you, but you know what I mean. And have a good evening.